Today, I'm joined by Mike Bradshaw from Pinpoint to discuss the key challenges facing organizations in talent acquisition and how technology can effectively address these issues. As VP of Talent, Mike brings extensive talent acquisition experience to our conversation today. And we'll be diving into the biggest challenges keeping TA professionals awake at night and exploring how Pinpoint is helping. This episode isn't just for those working in talent acquisition, it's also highly relevant for employer branding specialists who want to better understand TA pain points. A key focus of our discussion will be balancing technology efficiencies with delivering great candidate experience. So let's dive into the chat and don't forget to share with your peers. It really does make a difference. So it's great. It's great to get you on the podcast. I think particularly it's really important to showcase, tools and tech, but also opinions and approaches and strategies to solving the challenges that people listen to this podcast and watch this podcast have. So yeah, thanks for coming along. Let's just go straight off the bat. Tell us a bit about yourself and just a little bit about Pinpoint.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Mike Bradshaw. I'm the VP of Talent here at Pinpoint, so doing all things recruiting. I've been in HR and TA for about 15 years. The first half of my career was working for much larger companies, worked early days for Apple, Town Sports International, and then 8, 9 years ago, worked for my first sort of startup as that first sort of head of people, head of talent, first sort of HR and TA functions in place to help a Series A company grow and scale, and really fell in love with the idea of being part of startups. And that's where I've spent my time over the last 8, 9 years, is helping sort of pre-seed and Series A startups grow with those sort of foundational pieces, both in-house and sort of as a fractional HR leader. And I've been with Pinpoint for the last 4 years. And as I mentioned earlier, actually was one of Pinpoint's first US customers many years ago. So I actually bought the product, implemented it for an organization that I was head of people with, fell in love with it, implemented it for a number of other companies, and then really decided to join Pinpoint back in 2022.
Yeah, lovely. Look, I think given your background, you have a lot of opinion and experiences of the challenges that organizations face when it comes to candidate experience. But also, given what Pinpoint does, you're talking to loads of organizations every single week. So you've got a good kind of pulse on the challenges that people face. So what is it, that kind of classic thing about what is it that keep the people you speak to and have kept yourself, kind of awake at nights when it comes to candidate experience?
Yeah, there's a lot that sort of is affecting it right now, and I think TA leaders in 2025 are navigating one of the toughest landscapes that I've probably ever seen. The biggest theme overall is that recruiters are being asked to do more with
Yeah.
less, and this isn't new, right? It's been building over the last probably 5 plus years. If we zoom out, the labor market is really yo-yoed since COVID. We've had huge swings, pandemic shutdown, rapid rebound in 2021 to
Mm.
2022. We've had salary inflation, massive demand with talent, and then a lot of sort of economic and political uncertainty, tech layoffs, AI disruption. And what that's meant for a lot of companies is they've pulled back investment in recruiting. Some has seen it as maybe a temporary pause, or others have taken a longer term view on it, that recruiting functions maybe won't need as much resourcing in the future because potentially AI can just do it, right? Regardless of who's going to be right or where this lands, the reality is that today recruiters are doing more with less. And what that actually means in practice is, number of applications per recruiter are way up. This is also because of vast layoffs and other sort of factors. So recruiters are dealing more resumes, more inbound messages, more volume because of the sort of layoffs and because of the sort of mass application that we can do now. A lot of those applications aren't necessarily relevant. So it's adding a lot of work that isn't necessarily
Mm.
helpful. You have sort of AI inflated resumes can make it harder to distill what's relevant and what's not, and can actually sort of question your
Mm.
process and can actually lengthen it and make it more complicated. Recruiters have fewer resources, so budgets are being cut, teams are leaner. Recruiting can be sometimes the first place leadership decides to scale back. And on top of that, top candidates are harder to move. In 2021, 22, as I mentioned, people could job hop for a 25% raise overnight, and that's not
Mm.
happening anymore. And with flattened salaries and market uncertainty, those secure candidates are less likely to leave their jobs. And then I would say in the US, we've sort of seen this absurd and manufactured backlash against DEI. For years, recruiters who really believed in equity were patching holes in this sort of broken labor market, one that's been sort of built for pedigree over
Mm.
potential. And Now, this sort of imperfect, albeit progress, is being somewhat sabotaged by these performative and aggressive politics. And when you add in the reality that most hiring teams aren't just doing one kind of hiring anymore, they're trying to balance corporate roles, high volume frontline hiring, seasonal spikes alongside complex leadership searches, and they're doing it across multiple geographies, maybe brands, multiple functions. That level of complexity on top of all of that is stretching teams thin. And to your point around candidate experience, the paradox is that recruiters are buried in applications. They're struggling to win top talent. And that means candidate experience is more important than ever because you have these sort of more cautious candidates that are less likely to make a move. Your EVP, your job descriptions, your offering, your communication through the process has to be top notch, and you have to cut through the noise of now even more AI sourcing tools, right? More people are getting more messages in different
Yeah.
ways. And this is the place, then the piece that slips first. Every TA leader I talk to cares about candidate experience, but when their rec load is doubled, they've lost half their team, it's the first thing that suffers. And once it slips, it really is hard to sort of stop your process again and great experience midway through the year. And the last thing I would say is on top of that, the kicker while this is happening is TA is being asked to evaluate new tools, explore AI, implement automation. This is a great conversation to have in theory, but in practice, while you're building business cases, sitting through demos, trying to handle change management, all while doing the day to day without a clear strategy, the risk is you grab a shiny tool that doesn't solve real problems and actually makes them worse.
That's great. Look, there's loads to unpack there. I think there's some real good things for people to take away straight away on that. So you told me a bit about Pinpoint, but let's talk a bit more about the experience that your platform provides. Let's talk about those steps and how they are addressing the challenges that your clients face.
Yeah, for sure. So Pinpoint, for those that don't know, is certainly an applicant tracking system, but honestly, the phrase doesn't really do it justice anymore. What we've built is a platform that does help in-house recruiting teams manage the entire hiring process in a way that balances that efficiency with candidate experience. We talked about the challenges that most teams are facing right now. They're doing more with less, budgets are tighter, headcount on TA teams have shrunk, but applications are going up. On top of that, they have to figure out automation, go figure out AI, and by the way, don't let candidate experience slip. And those are competing priorities. Like you said, recruiters are the ones stuck in the middle, or as you said, they're being squeezed. Pinpoint helps solve that. It covers the full hiring cycle, which we think is table stakes. So everything from job intake, day one, hiring manager needs a job rec approved and really good intake process, that very first step, job descriptions, through sourcing, candidate screening, interviews, offers, onboardings, all in one place. But the big differentiator is that we've built it with a design first mindset.
Nice.
This is the first thing that pretty much everybody says when they go in, whether they do a demo online or they go in and click around, is the design, the ease of use, the intuitiveness of it. Recruiters love it because it's powerful, super customizable, flexible, but it's intuitive enough for the hiring manager that logs in twice a year can figure it out. That matters because when hiring managers actually use the system, recruiters spend less time chasing, more time focusing on candidates. You need that VP of marketing that is doing interviews maybe twice a year. They're not going to sit through a demo. They're not going to go on a training, but you do need their insights. You need them to go in and to use the system in a way that can help the team make the best hiring decision without them having to figure out a new system. And Pinpoint really does it in a meaningful way. When I talk to people about Pinpoint, I sort of put it this way, that it simplifies complex hiring. And we think that matters right now because a lot of ETSs are designed and are really good for one type of hiring. And that's fine if you're doing corporate roles in one city or just hiring high volume hourly roles in one location. But when you add that complexity, multiple role types, multiple geos, multiple brands, different hiring cultures, things start to break down, whether it's in the structures or the reporting or the rules-based permissioning. And that's the reality for most organizations that we talk to. They're not doing one kind of hiring. They're hiring desk-based and Essex workers. They're running graduate programs alongside leadership, senior leadership searches. They're trying to balance global employer brand guidelines with local market needs. Most ATSs are forcing them to sort of compromising either by over standardizing and losing flexibility or by sort of going rogue and losing control. And so we've built it to sort of specifically handle that complexity without compromise.
Nice. I mean, I've definitely been very familiar with ATSs over my career, and I think that Thing about usability and that design thinking approach, is it's not always done, is it? I think it can be built by great technical people, but if it's not built in a way that's usable for the busy person, as you say, it can only has only got a few minutes to log in and needs to know how it works. Then they've got big challenges. What I found really interesting is when we were talking like in the green room, but also as I was just looking at the platform, is looking either side of the transaction of applying. So there's that element of attracting and engaging as well, isn't there? So tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, we think that like the Pinpoint for the candidate side of things, whether it's your career site, job descriptions, outbound emails you're getting, sourcing conversations that are happening, that your brand, not Pinpoint. It should be very clear that it's your brand, that it's your outreach, and Pinpoint does such a great job out of the box doing that. So when you purchase Pinpoint, you get a branded career site that is super, super easy and intuitive to sort of stand up. And we make sure that the candidate experience from A to Z is really, really branded. It doesn't look like Pinpoint. It is your own sort of branded experience for candidates. We think that is
Mm,
super important. So whether it's the offer letter that goes out, or it's engagement emails, or it's the job descriptions, of course, the application itself, anything like that is really important. We talk about sourcing, engaging, whether it's the two-way integration with LinkedIn. So whether you're sourcing and having conversations in LinkedIn Recruiter that's feeding right in real time to Pinpoint, or
nice.
having them from Pinpoint, you've got that seamless integration. We think that's table stakes and really, really important. Whether you're using our sort of Chrome extension to source
Mm,
otherwise, right? You've got some options there. We know that there's going to be some work that's going to happen on other platforms, and we need to make life easier for the recruiter so they're not uploading things through a CSV file or using other
mm.
sort of third-party tools. We think that's really important. We built that in.
Why why is doing all that really important? And then we've gone back to the thing about hiring manager who's super busy and needs something quick and easy to use. But the thing about processing of candidates from that perspective, but you've got the career side of things, but then you've got the candidate comms, which is either sending out mass emails to groups of people or sending an email out on a case by case situation to then the onboarding. What pain points were these looking to address?
Yeah, I think that recruiting can sometimes feel like a volume game. And you think about,
Mm,
I need to go out and find an account executive or a customer success manager. You are starting with volume, whether you're looking at inbound applications or you're
mm,
sourcing, whether you're using LinkedIn or any other sort of tool. You're starting with a few keywords, and maybe you start to narrow it down. You start with 1,000 profiles, you start to use different keywords, and you sort of narrow that down to maybe 100, and you sort of go through. And it can feel very impersonal for what is a very personal thing, right? Like applying for a job, engaging someone on a job, talking to them about potentially leaving
mm.
their job security is like a very, very
Yeah,
personal
yeah,
and vulnerable
exactly.
thing. And I think that like we know that it's a very time consuming piece. And when you do find that candidate, and you do find that person or persons that you want to engage, because it's probably going to be multiple people you want to engage with, it's still going to be some
Mm,
volume. We want to make that as easy as possible for you, just to save you time, right? If you're going to send them this message, great. And it should be personalized, and it should be the things that reflect your brand. We also want a record of it. We want it to be really clear that when I see a candidate on LinkedIn, if they look really good, I may not remember, but I might go to engage them. It'll be right there that they're already
mm,
in Pinpoint. And then, oh, okay, wait, I've already talked to them. And I can look, oh, actually, they didn't work out. Actually, I interviewed them last year and it didn't work out. Or, we actually offered them a job and they didn't want to work for us. So I'm not going to bother them, right? So it's also for candidate experience and those
mm.
types of things. So it's creating the record, it's doing the stuff that's super boring, but really important. But we don't want to, waste the recruiter's time in doing it, but we think is
When it
meaningful.
comes to the front end side of things with the career site, you say every client will get a career site or the ability to create a career site off the back of it. Of why is that? Why was that important really for you to introduce?
Yeah. I mean, we want to do, we can't make decisions for customers, right? How they use Pinpoint
Mm,
necessarily. We try to give them guardrails and tools on what we think a good recruiting experience looks like, what good recruiting looks like, what a good candidate experience looks like. We have a view on those things for sure. And what we want to do is give people the tools and the easiest way and the shortest distance between what they're doing today and maybe they are already doing a fantastic candidate experience. But if they're not, or if they're just getting started, the shortest distance between doing that and what that means is when they buy Pinpoint, and even if they're a 15-person organization, when they turn on their box for the first day, they're going to have a branded career site. Like that's one thing that when I bought Pinpoint in 2020, my organization was maybe 70 people, it was a small nonprofit. We got it out of the box one, and they're still doing that
Mm.
today. Just like our support chat is sub 90-second response
Mm.
times. We've continued to scale that as we've, sort of quadrupled in size over the last couple of years. And, of course, there's ways for them to get assistance on more complex career sites. We offer that, of course, but they also can open up Pinpoint, and there's a no code way for them to add more pages and sub pages and an FAQ, and to add more images into videos where they can just use YouTube and Vimeo links.
A lot of organizations out there, their career site will be just a one page and it's join us. And maybe there's a little bit of copy to try and convince people that they're the right organization, but it's pretty much going, can you just go to the job vacancies and just apply, please? That's what it's doing. So I'm seeing more and more platforms, organizations providing this kind of capability. I think it's great because it makes employer branding a lot more accessible. It makes the whole thing about talent attraction a lot more accessible, because I've been involved in career site projects and they can take a long time and can cost a lot of money. Now there's a place for that,
Yes.
certainly, but I think something actually where someone can use and enter the game fairly easily, I think is fantastic. And dare I say it, getting hiring managers and getting recruiters thinking a bit more like employer brand, because they know that, oh, if we got this platform doing this, we're thinking more about how we position ourselves to make sure we are getting the right candidates in. For me, a natural question to ask here, based on what we've chatted about so far, is the role of employer branding through the candidate experience. Often you see it that actually, employer branding is seen as being great value to sell the organization, and that is being the marketing side of things, the branding and marketing side of things. But in your view, kind of what is the role, the importance of employer branding, but the benefit it gives the kind of people you talk to? What benefits does it provide them? So what's your view on that?
Yeah, it is important. I think so. One is it's about a consistent experience. I think for us and a lot of companies will have a tone and voice that they sort of try to adopt that gives a sense of what the brand is. I think it's important for recruiting functions if your company does have a sort of set tone and voice and a type of way that they sort of talk externally and position themselves to sort of adapt that. I think that's a nice polish and sort of professionalism that you can bring, and that's a nice thing to do. It is certainly selling. I think it's a sort of a legitimate, can help legitimize yourself especially as a startup when you're sourcing talent. It can help that. But employer branding, your EVP, how you position yourself is also about disqualifying
Mm.
people as well. We try to be really clear. And when we reach out to somebody, we don't know if they're going to be a fit or not. Their profile looks really good and interesting, but we don't know if they're going to be a good culture add or not, if they're going to enjoy
Mm.
working here. And so when we talk about our employer branding and our employer value prop, and what we talk about in our job description and our career site, there's a lot in there that is why this role is not necessarily for you. We have something on our job descriptions and it's written like cheeky in our tone of voice. I think it says the fine
Mm.
print, but way more
Mm.
exciting. And it's all the things that are really hard about this job. Like, hey, we're a B2B SaaS startup. And yeah, you may have worked here, but here's what's really hard about this at Pinpoint, or we think is really uniquely hard. And yeah, this is a CSM role, but here's why, 3 reasons why you might actually hate it. And, we're not trying to be silly or anything about it or to be self-important at all. We really want people to know that up front and be very honest about that. So, and again, that could be selling, right? For the right person, it is selling because like I've done that before, like I'm up for that
Mm.
challenge, but it's also very much about disqualifying. But we think it's the consistency. It's about the sort of polish and professionalism as well. A lot of the companies and startups do, like, we're fast paced. We do these things. These are our values. To your point, it better be the case in your candidate
Mm.
experience, right? So fast is one of Pinpoint's values. And so if we say that we're fast and I tell you in the job description, this role is for people that can do this and it has to be in this time frame, and we have sub 90-second response times to our customers, and then you apply and then you hear back from me in 4 weeks, or you interview and then you hear back from
Mm.
me in 3 weeks, you're going to think that Pinpoint or I'm a
Yeah.
joke,
Yeah.
right? And so that can't happen, right? Break that trust, and then maybe the candidate continues, maybe not. If they get a competing offer, they're not going to take
Mm.
yours. If they do accept the offer, you're starting off on like really a really
Yeah.
poor foot. So that's something that, and we really think it is important, is living up to that, not only for our customers, but absolutely to our
Mm.
candidates.
Yeah, I mean, that experience there actually just it speaks more volumes than a tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of great employer branding campaigning can do. You could have the slickest campaign, great videos, all sorts of interactive tools in your career side. But if then someone has that experience that you talk about, it just puts all of it in the dustbin, doesn't it, in the trash can? So that's really, really good to hear. And also, you've got. I'm a bit biased here, but obviously, you're talking on this podcast. There's a chance for people to understand the kind of person, the kind of organization that you are. But also, you know, I love the fact you've got your own podcast. And from the very top, the CEO is involved in that podcast, and so people can actually watch that to look behind the messaging, to scratch beneath that surface, so that actually they can know it's fast paced, but then they can kind of see the experience that it is by listening to the way people are talking. So, yeah, I think it's great. It's great to hear. It's great to see you're doing that. So, shall we finish off with? I suppose you touched on some of this already, but I think a few pieces of advice you'd give somebody who's listening to this or watching this about how to make sure they're providing the best candidate experience throughout, especially when they need to do more with less.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's certainly at the start was talking about how difficult things are for recruiters, and definitely I feel that and I sympathize for sure. At the end of the day, I would just say there really is ultimately no excuse for bad candidate experience. It is a really deeply personal, vulnerable thing that people are doing when they go to apply for jobs. Unfortunately, yeah, I will just say 9 out of 10 recruiting experiences are pretty bad and
Mm.
dehumanizing. When you talk about people that are unemployed, looking for work, for stability for their family, it's a very deeply personal thing. And I think that's the one thing that I love about being a recruiter is that we have the ability to make this. I don't know if hiring or looking for a job is ever going to be a fun
Mm.
experience, but we can make it a less painful and a more human experience. I think it's not a nice to have or a perk. It's something that we owe to candidates, just like we would owe a customer a good
Mm.
experience. And it is one of the biggest levers you have in your company for improving offer acceptance, for retention, referrals, and ultimately
Mm.
revenue. I can't tell you how many times we have won a candidate who had a competing offer, a better offer financially, and they trusted and chose us because of that candidate
Mm.
experience, because of the experience they had, the responsiveness, the transparency, the clarity, and the individuals that they met on our team throughout the
Mm.
process. I would just say so a couple things. First, just to get sort of tactical, candidate experience starts with hiring manager intake and alignment. When intake with that hiring manager is sloppy, candidates pay the
Mm.
price. Mixed signals, moving goalposts, wasted time. Intake alignment isn't just operational hygiene, it is the foundation of a respectful candidate experience. And when the recruiter and hiring manager are not aligned, the requirements, the process, the timeline, candidates will feel that all the way through. But there are a few fundamentals that we come back to all the time. One is transparency. So candidates knowing what they're signing up for. And so that means, like we just talked about, really clear job description, honest requirements, open salary ranges, a realistic picture of what the process is going to take. So every job description at a point, it tells you how many steps, who you're going to meet, and what it's going
Mm.
to take. So if there's a assignment or a project or something, a coding assessment, we're going to tell you what it's going to be and how long it's going to take. We think clear communication. Most bad candidate experiences aren't about rejection, they're about silence,
Mm.
unfortunately. So if someone applies, acknowledge it. If they're moving forward, tell them what's next. If they're not, close the loop quickly and commit to feedback. Every candidate who interviews with you deserves feedback. It doesn't have to be long, but it should be specific. We think you should pay candidates for their time. If you're asking them to complete assignment or a project,
Yeah,
pay them.
lovely.
We think it's a baseline of respect, and it signals how you treat employees once they're inside the
Mm.
company. A couple other things, I think you should have candidate SLAs, just like you have service levels for customers. You should have them for
Mm.
candidates. How quickly, in general, they'll hear back after applying, how soon after they interview, they'll hear back on next steps. I think interview hygiene and having structure and rules around interviews is really important. So, what does a prepared interview mean? That they've read the resume, they know the scorecard, they know the correct pronunciation of the candidate they're about to
Mm.
meet. Small things like I'm really very strict isn't the right word, that we always set an agenda up front. And this is like a very small thing, but like the start of every interview, we take 5 seconds to say, this is 30 minutes. I'm going to talk for 15. I've got questions for you for 15. I'm going to talk for about next steps
Yeah,
for two
nice.
minutes. Then you're going to have 12 minutes for your questions. So like they know I'm not going to prep you for 30 minutes. You're going to have a breath in 15. I am going to give you 10 minutes, or you can give them a ballpark. It just puts the candidate at ease. It lets them know what's going on. It is so, so
Mm.
important. And I would just say design fairness is the process. So again, this sort of interview hygiene, but structured interviews, consistent questions, clear evaluation criteria is a must. We've talked about reducing bias, but also giving candidates the confidence that they're being assessed on what actually matters, skills, potential, their ability to do the job. And then I just say the last piece is measure it. Candidate surveys, track that candidate
Yeah.
NPS, and hold yourself and your team accountable. If you don't measure it, you can't improve it.
Yeah, lovely. That's great. We could have a whole other episode diving into those things in more detail, but I really, really like that. And I think if you think about when it comes to, say, employer branding, and it's intrinsically linked with candidate experience and intrinsically linked with talent acquisition, it's ultimately, yes, words are important, but it's our actions, the actions of organizations, the individuals in the organizations that create an employer brand, and that reputation is only going to be good as the people and teams throughout that process understanding the importance of reputation. I think, especially going back, let's go full circle back to the beginning where we're talking about being squeezed tight and having a lot more to do with less, high volumes of this, high volumes of that. Things needing to be at pace. I've said it before. Pace is not about always going quickly, but it's found the right time to pace yourself slow and pace yourself fast. To take those times out to actually think about how your actions affect the reputation of the organization. And that's ultimately going to create a realistic employer brand, but also a great candidate experience that then results in people joining organizations like yourselves instead of other organizations that might have had better offers, whatever that means. Really appreciate the chat. It's always good to just chat about things like this. And well, anyone who's interested in talking more about this, then hit us both up on LinkedIn. We'll be in or around this video somewhere. We'll have details about Mike and the team. And yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris.